Okay, welcome everybody, and thanks so much for joining in. We're pretty excited about this. It's myself, Tina, and Kim from Inhand Equine Therapy, and we have Pete behind the camera, and this is our good friend Serena. This is my FEI Dressage Andalusian mare. She's going to help us with some exercises. Our big take home for you guys today is going to be some specific exercises allowing you guys to make some change on your horse. But first of all, we're just going to talk just a bit about conditioning and give you guys a few tips and tricks to be able to kind of assess your own horses and understand where you need to be when it comes to your own horse's condition. So Inhand Equine Therapy has been around for the last 24 years. We work primarily here in Alberta, but we do have some international clients that we regularly see. Now with this year not seeing those guys, we're going to miss out on that. But the neat thing is, it's allowed us to pivot a little bit and do quite a bit more filming and online things. So we're pretty excited, and Kim's going to explain that in a minute, of some of the things that we're going to bring forward for you guys from Inhand, and are also going to be specific things that you can use on your horse. Because one of the things that we are really striving for at Inhand is mastery. Mastery towards what we do as body workers, but also making sure that you guys feel like you can work towards your own mastery. So I think that's one of the reasons why we were excited to work with Alberta Equestrian and bring you guys this little talk today. So I'll just let Kim introduce our online platform, because that's going to be a place where you guys can go and learn a lot more of the type of exercises that we're showing you here today. And not just that, because I think there's a lot of exercises and people explaining some exercises out there. I think the bigger thing to it is that we're going to give lots of tips and tricks of what to watch for and what the exercises can actually tell you about your own individual horse. And we're going to give you a really good idea of that today with some exercises you can take home from today's lecture.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just wanted to add, Tina, it brought me onto Inhand Equine Therapy roughly 2.5 years ago now. And one of the things that really intrigued me about Inhand was the fact that continuing education is such a huge factor when it comes to advancing Inhand as individuals. And that really resonated with me. My father was an adult educator, and continuing ed was something, no matter what discipline you're involved in, he strongly believed that you needed to continue always advancing yourself. So I just kudos to Tina for bringing Inhand and this team together and really making that important. And I think, again, for you as potentially owners or trainers, whoever is watching right now, it's the same thing. So even as an owner, you can continue your education on your horses, which is exactly what you're all doing here on this Zoom call. So thanks for joining us on that for sure. One of the things that Inhand, as Tina mentioned, with the whole COVID crisis that hit, is it really allowed us to look at the online platform as something that we could add more quality content to. There is a lot of content out there. Some of the content potentially is a little bit misleading or maybe not as easy to understand. So that was one thing we really wanted to do. So the Podia platform is the one that we chose. So inhandequinetherapy.podia.com is where you will find the content that we currently have. And there is some free content there, the Mentor Me's that Tina has already put together, as well as a conditioning study that we did with Energy Equine. That really rolls into what we're talking about today with the conditioning. One of the things that is super important you need to be conscious of is making sure that when you do have a horse, you're able to assess them from their current standpoint and bring them back in a manner that is going to be conducive for them to be able to build the tissue, build the cardio without getting injured. A lot of times we get very excited, especially us in the Northern Hemisphere, that we might get blown in with a blizzard or something and not able to get to the barn often, or maybe you don't have access to a barn, and so it's all winter before you get back to your horse and can do some riding. And so we really need to be able to look at those horses, have that assessment done, and of course we would appreciate if you involve your body worker as well as your other equine professionals such as your veterinarian. Make sure that the horse is in a healthy state and that they are able to do the conditioning that you're wanting them to do. So the first thing I would really look at, not the first thing I'm going to talk about, Tina's going to talk as well, obviously, but is the cardio aspect of your fitness program. So cardio is really important. It's going to be dealing with both your respiratory and your heart rate, or the horses. And it's something that we need to look at because it's through this that we're going to be able to enhance the muscle, nutrient, and waste exchange. And that's really key, because if we look at a horse, if you relate it back to yourself as a athlete, if you go to the gym or you're going for a run, anything, and you overexert yourself, you're going to find that you are really sore the next day. Maybe not 24 hours, but for sure 48 hours.
It's that 48, yeah.
You're going to feel that burn in that. And so that is something we need to be super conscious of, and where you're going to get, you're going to be able to work through a lot of that with your cardio. So starting slow as we indicated, but then the cardio portion, sometimes people think of cardio as being your quote hack days or your trail days. So they're your easier days, something that, you know, you wouldn't necessarily think of it as part of building your fitness unless you are specifically in a speed event that's requiring the respiratory or the heart rate, more so than other disciplines. But we just have to realize that the cardio days are just as important as the strength days that you're going to be working on, your actual muscle building days. So one of the things that we need to watch for is if you're going to be working for, say, an hour's lesson, that you take 2 to 3 breaks within that, so that you're not just constantly working on that cardiovascular system, you're giving it a chance to recover. That's really important, is to make sure you have those recovery times in any of your disciplines, for sure. And the other thing is that you're really going to watch that you don't get into any training aspect that they're not already used to. So this isn't about introducing a new sequence of events. It's about staying within the gaits that they are already comfortable doing. So if you're just starting, the horse has had months off, it might just mean that you're at a walk, but you're walking and then you're taking that break, and then you're walking again and taking that break. And as you build, you introduce your trot work. As you build again, you introduce your canter work. But you just really need to make sure that even though it might seem like you're not doing a whole lot in an hour's worth of walking, or maybe you start off at half an hour of walking, you have to realize that you are on a much deeper level that you're not able to see.
Yeah, I like Kim's point there. It is a molecular change that's happening with the horse when you are building up the horse's recovery. And that is what cardio is all about, being able to bring that horse's recovery to be more efficient. So the reason why we have to have cardio, no matter what sport-specific event that you do, you need to have that aspect in there to allow the body to be able to work on its ability to, as Kim said, take waste products out of the tissue and really be able to recover, so that when you're doing your sport-specific exercises, the body can take the waste products that muscle contraction produces and be able to dissipate those out through the lymphatic system. So it's really important to think about your cardio. And I think the other day when Kim and I were talking about this lecture, one of her points is that she hears from lots of her clients that they just want to get out there and get long trotting and get a good sweat on. And that's what's going to bring their horse back into condition. And I think we're going to talk a little bit about fatigue in a minute. But I think one of the things that we really have to consider is that if you don't have a heart rate monitor, you really need to be looking at your horse's wind and at the flare in their nostrils and using that as a bit of a gauge, so that each time you push your horse, you're understanding where they're able to get to. And as Kim mentioned, you know, it's not usually the next day. It's kind of like all of us, you start a new gym program, right? And you go to the gym the first day and you think you're a rock star, right? And you go to the gym the next day and you're a little bit stiff, but you think to yourself, okay, well, yeah, no, I can still tough this out. And then as Kim had mentioned, 48 hours later is the point where, you know, you're like a robot because you can hardly move anywhere. And we want to use those same concepts and bring them back to your horse. So if you push a little bit more, like Kim said, you started at that 30-minute mark and you push a little bit more in your cardio day, and you end up then with a horse and you ride it the next day and you think, oh, feels pretty good. Okay, that was good. And you do that same day again. Well, the next day is going to be our gauge. Is the horse sore? Do you notice some behavioral changes in your horse? What do you notice that is bringing forward some ideas that maybe you hit that fatigue point a little bit too early? So it is really important to think when you're increasing your program. We hear this lots where people say, oh yeah, I'm going to build up slow. But build up slow has to have a little bit of parameters around it so that you're saying to yourself that you're going to change something every 4 or 5 days. You're going to increase to a level and try it the first day. You're going to keep that same level the second day. You're going to assess your horse on day number 3, or day number 3, which is the 48 hours later. Okay. And then you can go ahead, if the horse is comfortable at the 48 hours later, you can go ahead and increase again. Really important that you're thinking that through and understanding where your horse is at, which is going to take us right into my next point, which was going to be the way that you're going to use you guys as a ride programs. Now, if we were all in, Serena says, oh, is it boring? If we were all in rainbow and sunshine world and we could ride whenever we want, our perfect program for athletes would be 3 in 1. 3 days on, 1 day off. 3 days on, 1 day off. We don't like to string more than one off day together unless you have some kind of metabolic issue, you have an injury that you're coming back from that you're working on a program. Everything that we're talking about today is definitely about a sound, healthy horse that's coming back to work. So of course, there's factors that you need to consider when you're building a program. And as Kim said, your veterinarian or your professional body worker would be a good person to be able to help you to decide if your horse is coming back into condition here this spring, sound and healthy. So the other type of work that we're going to do is going to be our strength day. And most of us do this every day. This is our sport-specific workouts, okay? So I ride dressage, Kim's a cutting horse rider, and Pete behind the camera likes to rope and check cows. All 3 of us have very different ideas of what we think building strength for our sport is. The thing that gets people in a little bit of trouble is what they do is they do the exact same exercise day after day after day after day. They don't bring in any cross training, and they don't break even their individual sports up into the aspect that that sport has. So I'm going to talk just a little bit here about kind of dressage jumper guys, and Kim's going to talk just a little bit about her sport. And you guys are going to see that actually, when we compare our exercises back and forth, our baseline exercises are not that different, right? Because we're trying to be able to increase core tone, be able to turn on what's called the ring of muscles, which is the musculature posture that your horse is most athletic in, and be able to strengthen them that way. So I think it's really important to try to think to yourself, what do I do in my sport, and make sure I break that up. So at my level, I'm going to go ahead and call one of my strength days more of a lateral bend day. I'm going to try to get all my bent laterals in, my serpentines, spirals, figure eights, anything where I'm really working on bend in the body. Then another strength day for me would be more of a longitudinal strength day. So I'm trying to get to that next level of flexion. I'm trying to get to that next level of extension, working on my in and outs where I'm going from my working trot to my medium trot back to working. Lots of transitions throughout that day. And then for me on a cardio day, because my sport requires quite a bit of wind, especially because the horse is often in a lot of collection, I'm going to make sure that I have some hills and some sets where I'm doing a certain amount of strides out and a certain amount of strides at an easier gait for her, really making sure that I'm varying that. So Kim, would that be kind of similar to how you would break up your days? I know you have to be able to work on the cow, or if you're a jumper, you're going to have to be able to put those jumps in. But is that similar to how you would break your days up?
It would be now. I have to say, definitely have learned a lot. And even beforehand, I think it was more innate. We didn't necessarily do it with the same thought process that I currently have because of the conditioning work I've been doing with you. However, the cows for sure are going to be a day that you're going to have to fit in there. They have to be working on cows if you're a cutting horse or working cow horse or penner. At some point, you need to have that live animal interaction so that they don't become what we call cow fresh and then just blow around.
Yeah.
That's not good. But one thing I think people often negate is in sports such as cutting is the fact that cardio is so key. We work for 2.5 minutes is the time frame that we have to be in the show pen. Of that 2.5 minutes, you're probably working a cow for, you know, 1.5 minutes ish, maybe not even quite that long. And it, you know, but they think smaller pen, you're just going back and forth on a pen. Normally it's, you know, at a long trot stop, but it's those fast changes in pace that is really important, because those horses will come out of the cutting pen huffing and puffing,
right,
even though they haven't been running a mile a minute.
Right.
So that is something, again, that we need to work on as cutters, very much involved in our sport.
Yeah, I think so. And I think people really forget that all sports have the need to be able to have tissue that can recover quickly. That's going to get you to the next level. And I get a lot of clients that say to me, oh, this horse is tapped out. He can't go any further. And we assess that horse, and maybe they're doing a good job with some of their sport-specific training, but they've missed out on the strength exercises that are going to help the core tissue, and they've missed out on the cardio portion. And if we change just those two things, the same horse is able to do a lot more. So I think that's a really key point, to make sure that you're breaking your days up. So one of the things that I want also to mention on your strength and cardio aspect is how you take breaks. And Kim mentioned in her portion of the cardio that she's going to ask for 2 to 3 full wind breaks, making sure the wind comes back to normal. And I think the big thing that gets missed on strength days, especially when we're working on sports specific or we're in a lesson, I know for me, when I'm in a lesson and my trainer is working me quite a bit, we forget to do the breaks that are needed in strength days. In a 60-minute strength day, you're going to need to have between 6 and 10 breaks. 2 of those are going to be full wind breaks, where the horse is literally on a loose rein, they're walking out and they're catching their wind back. But I like to equate this to us. Remember when we were all kids and we did pull-ups when we could do pull-ups, exactly, in the playground? So do you guys remember you're doing that strength and, you know, you do 2 of them and you think to yourself, oh yeah, so we got 2 up and our muscle structure is, you know, starting to get a little bit tired, and we're starting to feel the burn and it's starting to shake a little bit, okay? When that happens, what do you guys see little kids do for the next pull-up? Well, the next one, what are they? They're kicking their little legs and they're wriggling their little body and they're trying their best to get the same job done, but they're trying to recruit other muscles to be able to get it done, because their muscles that are working are starting to fatigue and the waste products are starting to build up in there, okay? What's the next thing that you see them do? They drop down and they innately, little kids do it. They shake their little arms out, okay? We've all done that too when you've been to the gym, right? And you just give yourself a shake. Well, after that shake, you guys can do what? 2 or 3 more pull-ups, right? And that is because we allowed the muscle to elongate. We allowed the rush of blood to come in and clean out some of those waste products. So in your strength, on your strength days, so many people don't realize that you need those little 20-second breaks, and it literally can be 20 seconds. You just soften your horse's frame, English or Western, does not matter, and allow the horse to be able to elongate that tissue and just bring the blood back in, carry some waste products out. And that is so key. Now, if we think that most of us are riding for an hour, and if we want between 6 and 10 breaks, depending on how intensive your strength day is, that is going to mean that about every 6 to 7 minutes, you need to be stopping. So I always ask my clients, okay, you guys, how many of you are stopping every, kind of 6 to 10 minutes and giving your horse that little break? Again, it doesn't have to be 3 times around the arena. It just has to literally be that little shakeout, allowing the body to be able to rehydrate and take away some of the waste products that are being created. And that is such a huge thing. Everybody would get so much further, no matter what sport you're in, if you were able to do that every strength ride. And what Kim and I would love for you guys to do in your program, if you're like Kim, she loves her spreadsheets, so she's always sending me spreadsheets and days of doing things, okay? And I'm a bit of an anal Annie myself that way, so I like to have things written down. So we would like you to do, on your first set of 3 rides, a strength, cardio, strength set, and then a day off. Then your next set of rides are going to be cardio, strength, cardio, and a day off. Strength, cardio, strength, day off, cardio, strength, cardio, and so it goes. Now, of course, that's rainbow and sunshine land, and we all know that the real world is here, and we've all got jobs and busy lives, so sometimes that doesn't work out. But the big thing to take home from this point is for you guys not to do 2 strength days in a row that have the exact same exercises in them. We need to be either looking at the body from a different way. We need to be looking at the longitudinal side of the body. We need to be looking at the lateral side of the body. We need to really be assessing our days. Now, sometimes the horse is a bit of a poo-poo banana, so we know that those days maybe don't count. But if we have good rides, that's what we'd like to do. And we would also like to mention, because right now we're going to go into signs of fatigue, and we would like to mention that those poo-poo banana days, we're going to really challenge you guys to look back on the rides that you had before that. And is that behavioral change that you got, was it because the horse is literally just too fatigued to do the exercise that you want it to do yet again that day? Okay, so many of us, again, get focused on what we're working on in our sport, and we forget the other parts that have to be strong to be able to get sport done. Yeah, really important. So signs of fatigue on a horse are going to be behavioral changes, as we just mentioned. Change in flight path of the legs, so meaning that if you're going over poles or jumps, that you're getting, that legs are ticking them. The horse is starting to get lazy. I hear that lots from clients, that partway through their ride, oh, this horse always gets lazy, okay? Yes, 100% there is lazy horses. But if it's a lazy horse, it's probably going to be a lazy horse from the beginning of your ride, and not after that kind of magic 30, 35 minutes where the body literally just can't keep up with the amount of work that you're doing. So really think about that, where the horse changes partway through the ride. Anything where the horse itself is not able to do a movement anymore, so won't bend to the left part way through the ride. I get lots of clients that say to me, oh, it won't take its left lead, but it's only kind of halfway or at the end of the ride. Okay, some of those things really need to be targeted by some isometric exercises, which of course we're going to send you guys home with some neat ones today. So I think, watching for fatigue is a big one. Mm-hmm. Anything else you'd add on fatigue there, Kim?
I think that's just so many times it's forgotten about. We get into a mindset of, this is my goal, and I'm a big goal person, so I hear you on this one, that this is my goal for this ride. I want to get this accomplished. Maybe it's because we weren't able to the day before or 2 days before, but you can get really focused, and then you just kind of get to, well, the horse is just being a turkey. This horse needs to listen, instead of taking that step back. And it's such a good reminder for all of us. me included, that take that step back. Why are they being that turkey? What's going on with them?
Yeah. And I think we found that really clearly in the conditioning study we did with Energy Equine Veterinary Services, because we measured core tissue in the horse's back, all horses that had been off for a block of time due to different reasons. And as we brought them back, and I think Kim really said to me, you know, like, I know this stuff works, but now that I've seen it on my own horses, she was like flabbergasted at the changes it can make, right? So by really being able to target your horse's core tissue, you can make so much change in your sport. And even I'm going to use the example of my daughter, because we actually had her do the conditioning study, because we both get a lot of clients that say to me, oh, I can't do that. I'm not a very good rider. I'm not a very good rider. I'm just a pleasure rider. I'm just an average rider. So Kim and I were talking about it before we started the study, and Dr. Hewlett as well. And we all said, well, what about Maddie? Maddie's just 11 and her pony is 11 as well. What if we included her in the study? So the exercises that we did in the study, she was able to do them all. And her horse's jumping through the conditioning study has changed night and day. He was a bit of a rascally stopper, and now he is just flying over things. So, I mean, not to say we're not going to have some behavioral stuff, but the changes it makes, like, and your horses were just night and day as well.
My horses were, and I had one specifically that was coming back from an injury, a significant injury, and had quite a bit of time off. And so really watching her, thinking, oh, these exercises are easy. She'll be easily able to do these. I'll be at rep 50 in no time. And what I found was, no, she wasn't able to. And in fact, had to do some modifications so the rest of the tissue could build before we did some of the other exercises. So it was astounding for me.
Yeah. And I think it really got me so that, people say to me, oh yeah, but I just want to ride. I just want to get on and ride, Tina. Like, just let me ride. And I think if we can pass on anything today other than the program we want you to use and the cardio and the strength aspect, is that these isometric exercises, and we're going to give you 4 dynamite ones today, if you're able to do them before you ride, if you take the 10 minutes to do them before you ride, you will literally get further in your ride by doing them, because you're going to turn on the core tissue of the body and start to really target that core tissue of the body. And most of us, I mean, Kim and I as well, are just amateur riders. We're just out there, got a big grin on our face and we're going along. Sometimes my trainer says to me, what are you doing up there? And I'm like, I don't know, I'm just riding. Like, I'm just having a hoot, But it's really important for us as amateurs, because we're not the same as the coaches out there, and we don't ride quite the same, and we don't notice stuff the same. No. But by adding in these isometric exercises, I then can increase my horse's core tissue and be able to mimic some of the things that the really amazing riders can get done just through their rides. And our other thing is, Serena she says, yes, you need to be able to get to be a better rider. The other thing is that I'm going to be able to notice things with my exercises. So that takes us right into our next spot before we start the demo of the exercises on this horse, is that the exercises are a time for you guys to notice what's happening with your horse. Mm-hmm. Does my horse feel different from side to side on some of these that we're going to show you? Do they lift their back different from side to side? One day when I do them, are they good? The next day that I do them, are they really struggling? What is happening with my horse? And really start to be an investigator and ask questions. Why is my horse different from day to day is one of the biggest questions you can ask yourself to try to figure out how we can keep these horses long-term sound. Because I don't know about you guys, but this horse is 17 this year, and I was telling my friend Marion that came today that she's got to last till she's like 48, because I got to get to Grand Prix eventually, so might need another 10 years to get there. So we get so attached that we want them to be as sound as long as possible. So I think that's a great kind of point to take us right into the exercises. Yeah. So I'm going to give you 2 exercises and Kim's going to give you 2 exercises. So if we could turn her sideways, Kim. Perfect. Yeah, are we able to see that we're wanting the back? Oh, we need to back up a little bit? Okay. I think away from him. Just have to go that way. Yeah, perfect. Here, little buddy. That a good girl. That a good girl. Can we see this zone now? Perfect. Okay, so the first one that I chose to talk about, and there's lots of exercises out there, and like Kim mentioned, we've got a fantastic group of exercises on the Podia platform for you guys if you're interested. But I think this one I chose because everybody knows this one and so many people do it wrong. I'm going to show you the traditional old belly lift, okay? Now the belly lift is an excellent exercise to try to turn on the core tissue of the back, to try to stimulate your underside, so your obliques and your abdominals. And if done correctly, you're also going to get a little bit of hip flexor. We got some bugs coming out. You're also going to get a little bit of hip flexor work. So anybody that wants their horse to stop fast, jump over something, collect in dressage, has to be able to turn on that hip flexor tissue, okay? So I'm going to show you the correct way to do a belly lift. You're going to look at your horse's top line. You're going to find the lowest part of that top line, and you're going to bring your fingers around to the underside of the belly. I use my fingers in a back and forth motion like this. Sometimes I do back and forth and then slide along the underside of the barrel to try to get the barrel to lift up. Sometimes if your horse really hates tummy lifts, and I got to tell you, I really hate sit-ups, so I totally get this. You might need to use just a little dull hoof pick. Of course, nothing pokey that could hurt the horse, but just something to be able to help you. I'm going to go to the other side of the horse so you're not staring at my back. And again, whoops, we're losing our demo, girl. You're gonna have to come way back this way, I think. Perfect. Great. Okay, so as square as possible when you do your exercises so that you have your horse balanced. Finding the lowest spot of my back, I'm going to come on the underside and wiggle, wiggle, wiggle. Okay, and I'm getting a lovely belly lift. Now this horse is doing a good job as well of tucking her hind end under as she does it. That's something to watch for, because if you have a horse that takes its belly, or pardon me, takes its hip and rotates it forward with a look like this, okay, and gets quite tight through here, then you know that your horse's back and their hip flexors are not working together. And Kim's gonna have a great hip flexor core exercise for you guys in a bit. The neat thing about this exercise, and we're gonna turn the horse so that the butt is towards the camera, is you wanna make sure that as you lift this horse up, that you're really considering, is the back lifting up straight? Is it going to one side? Is it going to the other side? Because there comes your investigation. Any horse that I do, that the rider tells me that they're having a hard time turning it to the right, will normally do their belly lift, and they'll, ooh, I'm falling over myself, and they'll go ahead and they'll move their entire body over to the left, contracting their strong side, staying away from their weak side. So this is where those tips and tricks come in. You really want to be looking at the horse itself and seeing what it's doing. So if Kim can turn this mare so that, yeah, perfect. And hopefully now we're on a little bit of a slant here, gang, just with our ground that's here. But if Pete can kind of see from the back, good. So if I do a tummy lift here, I'm going to be looking at this tummy lift and I'm going to try to get it as straight as possible. Now you guys will have saw in this demo that her lower back here goes slightly to the right, and that is my weaker leg when I ride this horse. So my tip for this horse is, I'm always going to do my belly lifts on the right-hand side. Whatever side you're standing on, the horse will normally move slightly away from you, okay? So if you guys watch me do it on this side, you'll see I get a nice straight belly lift because I've stimulated her on her weaker side. So super important that I use that strengthening on that weaker side, because if I just did my belly lifts on the left-hand side, I would encourage that motion over to the right every time I did it. So all I'm going to do is reiterate to the nervous system that that new normal the nervous system has created, where the right side is weaker. I'm going to tell it over and over that that is the correct way to do a belly lift. So super important that not only are you guys doing the exercises, but you are doing them where you're being an investigator and seeing what's happening with the horse itself. Okay? This view will be the perfect view for my second exercise for you guys. And my second exercise is going to be a caudal tail pull. We'll show you this from the side as well, but I'm going to show you what to watch for on your own particular horse. Now, I've seen all kinds of tail pulls out there in the world, and I think people forget that this is your horse's spine. Everybody's worried about this part of your horse's spine, and you see them doing all kinds of crazy things to this part of your horse's spine. This, although you know, is easy for us to access, is just as important and has a fascial connection to the entire rest of the horse's body. So important that you're cognizant of what you're doing when you're working with your horse. To be, when I do any kind of tail work, that's going to be straight back, which this particular one is. I'm going to be looking at my horse's midline here where the spine's coming up to the top of the croup. And I'll stand to this side because I think the camera's a little bit that way. And I'm going to look to make sure that my tail is lined up with the rest of the spine. When you're doing caudal tail pulls or straight back tail pulls, you don't want to be pulling to the side. Now, we do an exercise where we pull to the side, but that's a very specific stifle exercise, not trying to stimulate both sides of the horse's back. I'm going to stand slightly to the side so I wouldn't get kicked. I'm going to line that tail up with the spine. I'm going to make sure it's in about the angulation that the croup is in. So I'm not going to wrench it way up or pull it way down. I'm going to look at the angle of that croup, and I'm going to have the tail coming out at that angle. I'm going to put two hands underneath the tail so I can support it well. I'm going to turn my body. I'm going to look at the back of the buttock, and I'm going to do a little tug. And when I do this little tug, I want you guys to watch here on both sides of the horse, and you'll see, because my horse is stronger on her left hip than her right hip, that the left hip pops way up, okay? And the right hip stays pretty flat. So let's have a little look here, okay? So this left side definitely popping up a little bit higher than the right side. And I'm just gonna do these little tugs. And these little tugs, as you'll see from the side view in a second, are gonna stimulate the horse's core tissue the whole way along. It's also gonna stimulate the underside and your pectorals. So any of us that want to lift up off that forehand are gonna get a lot of benefits by doing this tail pull isometrically like this, okay? When we know that we're tugging hard enough, when you see these muscles jump up. If you do not see the top of the butt there jump up, you know that you haven't tugged hard enough. You just need to tug hard enough to make that jump up. It's not about wrenching on your horse's tail. It really is about creating stimulation all the way down the spine. So let me show you that one more time from the back, and then we'll go to the lateral view for you to see the same exercise. Okay? Now, repetitions are a question. I'll let Kim turn the horse while I talk here just a little bit about repetition. repetition is a question that we get a lot. People want to have a very finite amount of things that they're going to do with their horse. Kim and I always tell people to start with about 10 to 20 reps of your isometric exercise. The kicker with that is you have to watch for fatigue. So if I'm doing belly lifts and the first 3 are great, and then my horse is turning around and trying to bite me, lifting its hind leg up and giving me the little warning sign, lots of times people say to me, oh, my horse hates belly lifts, okay? Actually, probably it's the same thing that happens to me after 3 sit-ups. I'm like, can't get it done, okay? And so the horse is saying, I don't want to anymore. It's too hard. If you guys would stop before that point in time, even if it's only 2 belly lifts, that will eventually get to 3, eventually get to 4, eventually get to 10, 20, and so on. And I think when Kim does her 2 exercises, that's going to be something that she really wants to talk about, because for your horses, it was a big change with backing off and only doing what they could do, right? They just started to soar in the amount of muscle that we had, okay? So here I am from the back view. If you guys watch the underside of the horse and you watch what's happening to her top line, you'll see that these little tugs are doing a lot on this horse, where she has to isometrically contract to be able to withstand my little tugs. And you can see that we're just being very careful with these light little tugs, just stimulating the body, okay? This exercise alone, even if it's the only one you do, will do the top line and the underside and really make a change. When we added this exercise to our conditioning study of the core tissue, it really made our muscle numbers, the depth of muscle, jump up. So it's a really excellent exercise. Because I'm going to hold the horse from the front, I'm just going to pass the mic over to Kim here for her 2 exercises.
Okay, thank you.
Side view okay for you? Probably want me over here.
Yeah.
So side view and front view.
Yep, please. All right. So my 2 exercises that I am going to demonstrate for today, the first one is called the neck dance. So some people get a little confused when we make that comment, but essentially you really are going to see the horse move back and forth as if they're dancing. The key factor here is we're going to be doing it down the cervical spine here. So you want to be sure that you're on the cervical spine. You can see the jugular groove here. So if you kind of rest your hand in that thumb in that jugular groove, you're going to span that area. While you're doing this, make sure the horse, again, as Tina had indicated, in any of these exercises, you want them to be as square as possible and straight line. Obviously, in this one, we want that neck to be as straight as well, and that they're not gawking around. But you're going to have your hands next to each other on either side of the horse's neck, as opposed to opposite or scissors is maybe a better way to say that. So once you have found the base of the neck there, you're going to take your hands and you're literally going to push with, in my case, my left hand here, and then I'm going to pull with my right. I'm going to push with my left, pull with my right. As we do this, you're going to start to notice the horse is going to start to move between their front forelimbs. So they're going to put weight down in one fetlock and then balance and put weight down in the opposite fetlock. We want to see that. While they're doing that, they're going to be engaging that thoracic sling of muscles, the pectorals. And we're also going to, because we're again dealing with the spine in our hands, we're going to watch what kind of movement we're actually getting down the back as well. And this is one of those points that it's good to take note of so that you can chat it through with your body worker next time you see them, is what is their back able to do while you're doing this exercise? Is one side firing, not the other side? Do you see it movement nice and symmetrical all the way down while you're doing it? Or do you see it being really jerky one way or not maybe even engaging at all one way or the other? So as we start we're going to go back and forth and back and forth. And we're going to work our way up the cervical spine. And in Serena's case, you can see she's able to have that nice fluid movement all the way down that spine, all the way through the back tissue. You may not be able to see it as clearly if you're not zoomed in on it, but I can tell you right now, she's, pardon?
We can do a cranial view.
We can do cranial view, yeah, if you want to. Or we can post some stuff up on our social media as well later. So we're going to go up and down the spine 2 to 3 times. Again, watching for that horse's fatigue level. If you note that your horse is not able to do this, and by not able simply means, again, the attitude comes out, possibly they will be moving around a lot as well with their front legs, as long as they're not distracted and we simply know that the horse is struggling with that. Those are the sort of things you're going to look for. My horses, as Tina had indicated when we did the study, this was one of the exercises they had a really hard time with. They were both coming from extensive time off, the one being almost 2 years off of any kind of work. And so she literally could not even do one of these neck dances, just even at the base. So it took quite a while for us even to do one full repetition up the neck for her to be comfortable with this. If you don't want to do up and down all the way, you can be at the base, and this is what it's going to look like. So again, my hands are opposite each other, pushing and pulling, pushing and pulling. And you can see probably really well here, those pectoral muscles as they're firing down here. But if you get to the top and you feel more comfortable bringing your hands down, that's quite all right as well. And then just working your way back up again. Back and forth. Pardon? Sorry, yeah. So as Tina mentioned there, it's really wanting to watch so that evenly the pressure in our hands with the push and the pull is even. And again, it's rhythm just like you're doing a dance. Back and forth. Now, all of us are going to be, well, I shouldn't say all, there are people out there that are ambidextrous. But if you're like me, or you're right-handed, you're going to be stronger in your right arm than your left. So you're going to really want to make sure that you switch over and you do from the right side, your neck dance, and then you move your body to the other side of the horse to do it again, so that it's nice and even. The second exercise I wanted to go over is called the hip flexion. So with hip flexion, we're obviously flexing the hips, so we're enacting those muscles, the hip flexors, but we're also going to get them along the back tissue, because the back tissue itself is also going to aid those hip flexors in order to get them to come underneath themselves and then fire in that back tissue, as well as abdominals. So once again, we're going to have the horse as square as possible, so we might just back up a little bit. Half a step, Serena. You are such a good girl. And in this case, I'm going to have my 2 fingers, or if you might want more if it feels good for you, but I just use my index fingers here. I'm going to come where the sacral tuberosity is on top of the horse. So your top point on the rump. On either side, roughly a few inches off, I'm going to put my fingers in and I'm going to bring them down. And as she's able to, she's going to round up with those hips, and you see her engaging that back as well as she goes. Now, the thing we want to be really conscious of is that she's able to do this straight, that she's not bringing the hip off to one side or to the other. And if she is, then we have to think to ourselves, is it me? Because again, I'm more dominant in my right arm, so am I pushing a little harder with that hand? If that's the case, I'm going to come to the opposite side and check it out. Oh, Oh, I know. She says it's been a long time. There we go. Perfect, Serena. So once again, with my fingers, I'm going to just put some light pressure in, and I'm going to bring her down. And in her case, as she is a little bit weaker on that right hip, I note that, nope, she does want to go off to the right a little bit. So one of the other points then that we're going to make is we don't want her to constantly just driving that off to the right, because as Tina mentioned, neurologically, we're just going to keep enforcing that habit. So instead, as I do this, I'm going to find that spot where she comes as straight as possible. And here she comes, wants to go about here. I'm going to hold it there. Instead of continuing on and making the hip come further to the right, the other thing is to make sure when you are, after you've held that for a few seconds, just give a little bit of a massage at the end. Bring that circulation there.
Question, what is the name of the third exercise?
The third, the neck dance. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So these are 4 exercises. Oh yeah, sorry, thanks Tina. The other thing we wanted to make sure and note with specifically with the hip flexor one is we will oftentimes see people say, oh, watch my horse. It can really flex, which is great until you watch what they're doing. And what they'll do is they'll come in and they will literally just zip down their horse. And instead of actually engaging those muscles, what you end up doing to the horse is just a quick jerk reaction. And that's not conducive whatsoever to building strength in your muscle tissue. So we do not want the ballistic contractions. We want that steady contraction and being able to hold it. That's what we're looking for. Is there anything else, Tina, you'd like to add to those points?
No, I think that's great. I think we'll check in with Erin and see if there's any questions. Those 4 exercises would then be allow you to go right from the front of your horse, right through the midsection where most of us amateurs miss that nice back tissue and core tissue, and be able to engage the hind end. Remember that when you're doing your exercises, you want to make sure that you're looking at doing them in the same way you want them in the ride.
Yeah.
So if you don't want your horse to jerkily turn something on and then turn it right off again, that's not the way we're going to train in the isometric type exercises. We've really got to be looking at those isometric exercises as part of our training regime, and a little bit of an investigative time as well, like we just talked about, because sometimes it'll tell you where your horse is doing things correct or not.
And I think one other point I'd like to add is just in terms of the baseline fitness on your horse, these are awesome exercises that you can do for your horse in those times when you're not able to necessarily get to the barn or ride. If it's a day that's super cold in the middle of winter, these are things that you can do to, if you do them consistently, you're going to note the biggest change. And I think to me, that was the biggest point that I noticed with my 2 horses coming back in that conditioning study from such long periods of time off. The other key point, take pictures, because that's really going to show you. I knew that they were starting to be able to do the exercises more easily and our repetitions were increasing. However, when I saw the photos, and my gelding was a great example of a horse that really wanted to drop his sternum down, in the photos, you saw that all of a sudden that sternum was up in a very short period of time. No riding really in part of that at all. That was because of the COVID situation. We couldn't ride with the arenas. So that's another point, is this is something that is going to help with that baseline conditioning.
Great. I think we're just going to check in with Erin and just see if there was any questions. And of course, I guess while we're doing that, we can easily say that if you have any questions for us, please reach out to us on any of our social media sites, Facebook or Instagram. or at inhandequinetherapy.com and shoot us a question there, because we're more than happy to help.
Absolutely.
We really honestly want everybody to do well with their horses. And we often get people that just send us a little video that says, is this right? Am I doing this right? You know? So, you know, reach out and post that on our pages, because we'd love to give you a thumbs up, and it might help another rider too.
Absolutely.
May we have the tail pull from behind here just so I can get a better camera view of what's happening?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely.
Come on, Mr. A little bit more time. Right, with their feet, you want to further back? Don't want to step on that beautiful tail.
Just a little bit squarer if you can. Oh yeah, more dorsal view. Oh, tail pull, not flexion. All right, ready? Really see all the interaction down the spine.
And I don't know if they're interested, but you can really see the pectorals as well working. So it's a good angle for them to note how
Good.
much of a full body rotation.
Okay. Anything else come up for us, Aaron, on the chat?
Belly lift closer and just to see what the fingers are doing on that exercise.
Oh yeah, great. Okay, so first I'll do the fingers on the exercise. So I personally take both of my hands underneath, and I have my fingers pointed in towards the horse's belly, and I scrub back and forth like this. If I have a horse that won't move, I'll scrub back and forth, and I'll make my way along the middle of the body. So let's see if we can get a close-up of that. So again, I need to find the lowest spot of the horse's back, and I'm going to come all the way around to midline. I'm going to take my finger. So can you see underneath the horse, Pete? Can you see my fingers down here? Oh yeah, he's coming. He's on the move, everyone. Okay, so I find the midline of my horse's belly. I'm going to take my fingers and I'm going to scratch back and forth like this and get that nice belly lift. If she wouldn't lift, I could move my fingers along the belly like this, scratching as I go, trying to make sure that I engage that entire underside of the horse.
If you have had a horse that's been off for a year, when would you start? Can you say that again?
Some of these exercises.
Start the trotting process and trails just for fitness.
So that horse that's been off for a year, a little bit of it is going to be a bit breed specific, because your faster twitch muscles, horses are going to come into condition a little bit quicker. But as a general rule of thumb, when you're working on that horse, we'd actually like you to start on the ground first. Because we really forget as riders that when we put our rider weight on the horse, that the body has to be able to be prepared to carry that weight. Otherwise, the horse is going to have to use its stabilizers much harder than it would in a normal fashion. So that horse that's been off with for a year, we would really recommend you start on the ground. We would start literally with 10-minute hand walk and start into some of these isometric type exercises. We also really like to use things like a turn on the forehand, turn on the haunches, backing up, making sure that that horse is able to have, oh, we've got a loud helicopter, making sure that that horse is able to have a baseline of condition before we put the rider on.
I think that's a good point with Julie. So that was my mare that had actually 2 years off. So once the horse has been passed by the veterinarian, the health is healthy enough to be able to start that. But her program, this is where we started with her.
Was literally at the isometrics.
Sorry, we have to get closer.
Oh, closer together. Closer together. Sorry.
Was literally at the isometrics. And then from there, I started her with ponying off of another horse, if that's an option. before I even got on her. So she did do some trotting, but it was not with rider weight. And once she started there, I would saddle her. So she had tack weight without the rider. And now, you know, we slowly started. Granted, we had some injuries we were going through, so every case is going to be different.
Right. Perfect. Serena says, I don't know, you guys.
For the exercises, would it be better to do after the horse is warmed up?
Oh, good question. So ideally, especially if it's a really cold day in Alberta, you would want warm tissue. So even a 10-minute hand walk would allow you then to be able to do the exercises safely without feeling like the horse was not warm enough to do the actual isometric range of motion. So that would be ideal if that worked into your day. You can do these exercises before or after work. We often do them in the repetitive fashion that we showed today before work, so that the core tissue is turned on and the body is literally ready to take that extra weight bearing of the rider and keep their core muscles turned on. You could also use them after your exercise program. And each one you did, you could do as a stretch. So you'd lift the belly up and hold it. You'd pull the tail and hold it. You would do your pelvic flexion and hold it. Neck dance is a little bit harder because it is about rhythm, but we often like to do a range of cookie stretches for after if we're dealing with trying to stretch out the neck and the spine. So those can definitely be used before and after work. And you would do them in two different fashions, whether you want them to stimulate your horse and allow the nervous system to turn on before you add the weight, or you want them to stretch out the horse and try to elongate the tissue after work.
Should you do the exercises every day? And part two, especially for school horses, like old school?
Oh, that is a super question. So because we talk so much about the strength and cardio days, that's a great question to come up. So yes, you can do the isometric exercises every day because what they're doing is stimulating the nervous system to be able to use a muscle in a specific way. You could use them with your strength days or with your and with your cardio days. And like the school horse question for the part two would be brilliant because lots of the kids that are learning or even adults that are learning, you know, they're not able to get the horse round and the horse is going a bit upside down. So to have the core tissue turned on before that horse had to work would be an absolute brilliant thing for that horse. So yes, they can be done every day. And yes, they can be done with either your cardio focus or your strength focus.
Is there a heart rate monitor that is recommended for tracking cardio?
Oh, so a couple of the vet clinics are selling some really neat heart rate monitors. So I'd probably refer you there. There is one I know that Energy Equine is selling that goes on your bridle. So it's quite easy to use that way. So I don't have a particular brand name that I would recommend. But I do know that a couple of the vet clinics at Moore's as well, I believe, are stocking some heart rate monitors. So that might be the place for you guys to go to look if you did want to track your horse's heart rate.
For hip flexion, what is the goal for the reps and the hold time for each rep?
Oh, great. So the question was for the hip flexors, how many reps? All of these exercises, we're going to start in that 10 to 20 reps, depending on where the horse does go for its fatigue point. Remember, as soon as something changes, you have hit fatigue. So as Kim mentioned on her horses, sometimes you're only going to get 4, and the next day you're going to get up to that 10. So do not keep doing them if your horse is exhibiting a change in what he was able to do earlier. So always looking for fatigue. But if we were going to have just a little bit of a baseline, we're going to start with that 10 to 20 and go up. As far as the hold times for your hip flexors, if you were going to use that exercise as a stimulation before you got on, we would just do the flexion and allow the horse to come back. Do the flexion, allow the horse to come back. If you want to use that as a stretch for the back, after work, you're going to go ahead and do it and hold for anywhere between 5 to 8 seconds.
Can you give examples of the difference between cardio work and longitudinal work, and examples different examples of cardio?
Yeah, so cardio work is literally going to be just like it sounds, getting the respiration up. So lots of times people think of cardio as sets, meaning that you're going to do a set of 20, you're in the canter or you're in the trot, you're going to do 20 strides at your medium trot and come back and do 20 strides at your collected trot and in and out like that. So people are pretty understand intervals from human athletic training quite well. So that would be an example of your cardio. Going out and long trotting for a certain amount of time would be an example of cardio. Anything where in your sport you're going to need a burst of speed, you're going to have to try to simulate that in your actual activity. So if it's for Kim, where the horse has to turn fast and blast off, she needs to be doing a lot of transitions into a gait and then into a larger trot or canter from that gait. So you want to look at what your sport requires and then try to simulate that in your ride without doing it from a strength factor. And I think that was the part 2 of the question. So then how do you differentiate the two if you're calling that is going to be your cardio day? How are you working on things like transitions and your flexed exercises on your longitudinal strength day? So strength day longitudinal would be where you're going for more collection. No matter English or Western, we're all looking for that ring of muscles to turn on, the underside to shorten, and the top frame to elongate. So we're looking, that's going to be your exercises for longitudinal strength day. Transitions would be included in that, but instead of saying that we were going to do those in the counted out stride length, we would be doing 10 or 12 transitions on a circle or 6 or 8 on the long wall, where we're really focusing on how under is my horse coming, how much shortening am I getting of my underside, how much elongation am I getting of my top line.
What kind of type of post-riding exercises do you suggest besides the ISO exercises?
That's a great question. So post ride exercises. So isometrics are good if they're held so that they're then turning into more of a stretch. But stretching is a huge key to allow your horse to elongate tissue and literally milk out waste products that may have been created and are stuck in the musculature from the ride. So we would recommend that you guys do either from your body worker or veterinarian, get some suggestions for your specific horse on a stretching regime. Today, because we were talking about conditioning, the isometric exercises can easily be adapted into your conditioning program. But any ride should contain a good stretch portion, especially for areas of your horse that are weaker or stiffer. Oh, and Kim's making an excellent point right now that when you guys do walk off, this is one of our pet peeves. When you guys do, you're cooling out your horse, muscles, especially if they're in good shape and it's been warm that day, take anywhere from 15 to 20 minutes to cool off. And you cannot cool your horse off while you're sitting on its back. Because if you're sitting on its back, it has to hold you up with some contraction. Until you get off, the back tissue does not have the chance to cool off. So super important that you hop off your horse and you hand walk to cool off. Great point.
What is the minimum to do exercises to see change in the horse?
So the minimum is going to be hopefully a minimum of 3 to 4 days a week to actually start to see change. When Kim and I did the conditioning study with Energy Equine, we did do it as best as we could in our lives, the 3-on, 1-off program. And they did get 1 day that was totally off. And we saw huge changes within 3 months. We saw an immense amount of growth in core tissue. And you can access all that info on our Podia site for Inhand Equine Therapy. For a minimum, which was the question, you really do need to be that 3 or 4 days a week. And literally, if you didn't have time to ride that day, you ran out to the barn, you did a 10-minute hand walk, you did these 4 isometric exercises, hopefully getting to that 20 repetitions for each. But again, if your horse hits fatigue, that's as many as you're going to do that day. Do a 5-minute hand walk to cool them off and leave the barn. You would be much further ahead than giving that horse extra days off.
Consistency.
Consistency is the key, like with us.
Yeah.
Yes, he did. His timer's going on.
Last question, any cautions with these exercises with a horse being rehabbed from kissing spine?
Oh, yes, lots. So we would love that kissing spine client just even to check in with us, or we'd love to pop out and see it. Kissing spine has so many, it's kind of the buzz thing, and it has so many variances to it. Now, I have 4 current kissing spine clients in my practice, and we're having excellent luck getting those back into a full work program. But we do have to be very careful that we are targeting the body. So you need to know where the spine is kissing. You need to be able to work with your body worker to make sure that that area is being stimulated, but not overstimulated. And that you're also looking at where the horse went with its compensatory factors because of that disruption in the spine that it has. So did it drop its neck? We have to deal with those compensatory areas as well. Otherwise, the body will literally just go into a guarded type of movement, and you won't be able to actually get the range of motion that you're looking for. So excellent question. There is for sure some considerations, and by checking in with your veterinarian or body worker, I think what those conditions are. But our big ones to caution for are going to be where the compensatory factors are and where and how many segments of the spine are kissing. Super. So thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. Kim and I really enjoyed it. And we look forward to hearing from you, like we say, on any of our social media platforms. And if you have any questions at all, please do reach out, www.inhandequinetherapy.com.